My name is Amy, and I'm 42 years old. I've been married to my husband, Kyle, for 12 years. He's the same age as me, and we used to work together in the same department. Now, we work at different branches. Kyle is a responsible man, and the people who work under him really admire him. He doesn't like to show his weaknesses and can be a bit vain. He used to be very confident and outgoing, and his bosses thought highly of him. They expected him to get promoted easily. On the other hand, I'm more quiet and tend to stay out of the spotlight. I was surprised when Kyle pursued me so passionately since our personalities are so different. After dating for 5 years, he proposed to me with a big bouquet of roses. I had never felt so loved before, so I immediately said yes. I was excited to start our life together. However, after we got married, I found out we would be living with his parents. There was no prior discussion about it, and I wanted to say no, but Kyle was insistent. He told me, "My parents are good people, so everything will be fine," and he explained how much they were looking forward to having me live with them. I felt like I couldn't refuse. We've been living with his parents for the past 12 years. Life there was tough when we first got married. Every day, after making breakfast for everyone, my mother-in-law would nag me, "Amy, you've forgotten to clean the entrance again." This happened daily. I would apologize, but she would say, "Just saying sorry isn't enough. If you understand, go and do it right away." Even though I had to go to work, I was treated like a servant in the mornings. For the past 12 years, I've had to wake up at 7 a.m. to cook breakfast and clean. My mother-in-law is a housewife, so she should have time to do the housework herself, but she doesn't. I rush through the morning chores, go to work, come home, and immediately start cooking dinner. When I go to bed, I'm so tired that I almost pass out. This has been going on for so long that I've become weak and often feel sick. The stress is probably the reason for this. Make sure you clean properly. "I don't want the neighbors to think we're neglecting it," my mother-in-law would say while relaxing in the living room, eating the breakfast I made. She'd also add, "If you don't finish quickly, you'll be late for work." Even with all this going on, my husband never stood up for me, and my father-in-law would just hide behind his newspaper, pretending not to see. Since moving in with my in-laws, I've been treated terribly. The stress has caused me to lose a lot of weight, and I now look unhealthy. My period stopped because of the sudden weight loss, and I couldn't get pregnant. Despite this, my mother-in-law kept blaming me. Before I got married, I cared about how I looked and was healthy. Now, there's no sign of that. The stress from the mistreatment and the shock of seeing myself in the mirror makes me feel depressed. I've become completely submissive to my mother-in-law. I've lost all motivation and don't even want to leave the house. During this time, I got news that my father had died in an accident. I hadn't visited my parents' home in a long time because my mother-in-law and husband would criticize me for wanting to go. I deeply regret not visiting more often when I heard about my father's death. My parents' home is about an hour's drive from my in-laws' house, so it's not too far. I asked them if they would come to my father's funeral. "My father's funeral is happening," I started to say, but they cut me off. "Well, we won't be going. Just have your family there, okay?" I never thought they could be so heartless. I simply replied, "I understand," while trying to control my anger and sadness. Many people attended my father's funeral. He was self-employed and had many connections. Everyone who came to the funeral shed tears, showing how much they loved my father. "Amy, it's been a while. You've lost so much weight. What happened?" My mother, who I hadn't seen in a long time, was shocked by how thin and unhealthy I looked. "Oh, it's nothing," I replied. "You're not sick, are you?" she asked, concerned. "I can't bear to lose you too," my mother said, thinking I was sick. She had just lost her husband and started crying. "I'm not sick, Mom. I'm fine. Don't worry," I reassured her. We sat down in the waiting room to take a break. Well, if you're not sick, what's going on? She asked. I thought about how my mother-in-law and husband had treated me. Even after learning about my father's death, they didn't offer any comfort. Feeling angry, I decided to tell my mother about my life with them. Actually, I've been experiencing what you might call bride bullying. I'm just so tired, I said, looking down. She looked at me with concern. I'm glad you're not sick, but this doesn't make me feel any better. Is this why you haven't been visiting much? I nodded. She then handed me a piece of paper. Read this and think carefully about what to do next, she said. The paper was my father's will. Being meticulous, he had prepared it in case something happened. It included details about inheritance. I get $570,000? I exclaimed, shocked by the large amount. You can decide how to use it, my mother told me. I was stunned but also hopeful. With this money, I could build a house and leave my in-laws' home. My life seemed to be looking up thanks to my father's inheritance. When I returned to my in-laws' house, I did the usual housework. On days when I had plans, the house got messier because there was no one else to clean. As I worked, I thought about the $570,000. Despite my resentment toward my mother-in-law, I still wanted to be with my husband. I decided to be honest about the inheritance and suggest that we move out. I have something to talk about, I told my husband after my in-laws had gone to bed. We were alone. Yeah. What's up? He asked. It's about my dad. It turns out I'm going to inherit his estate, I began. Oh, really? How much? He inquired. It's $570,000, I replied. He looked shocked, as if he couldn't believe it. What? Are you serious? Yes, $570,000, I confirmed. When he realized what I was saying, he was thrilled and said, Wow, he left you that much. That's so generous. Since he was in a good mood, I decided it was the right time to talk about what to do with the money. But before I could say anything, he said something shocking. We need to transfer that money to my mom's bank account right away. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Wait, why? I inherited it, I said, thinking he must be joking. It didn't make any sense. He suddenly slammed his hand on the table and said, What kind of nonsense is that? A wife's money belongs to her mother-in-law. He seemed completely serious, and I felt scared seeing how determined he was. I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're saying, I replied. All I wanted was to talk about building a house for the two of us, but he wanted to turn my inheritance into his mother's property. That night, I was so shocked that I couldn't sleep. The next morning, as I was making breakfast, my husband and mother-in-law approached me with angry faces. So, Amy, I heard you inherited $570,000 but said you wouldn't give it to me. What are you thinking? My mother-in-law demanded. She had already heard about the inheritance from my husband. But I'm the one who inherited it, I said, trying to stay calm. Stop arguing and transfer it to my mom's account right now. A wife's money is the family's money, right? My husband insisted. They were both determined to take the inheritance, no matter how much I resisted. Realizing that arguing was useless, I stayed quiet. Then my husband handed me a piece of paper. You're getting carried away just because you got some money. What's with the attitude? I'm the one supporting you. If you don't change your mind, it's divorce. The paper was a divorce form, already signed by him. Take this and go back to your parents' house. If you apologize properly, I might not go through with the divorce. As I stared at the divorce form, memories of my life in this house flooded back. I had never been supported here. I paid the same living expenses as my husband, and all the housework was my responsibility. They had never taken care of me, yet they always looked down on me. Now, they were trying to take my father's money too. If I stayed, I might give in to their pressure and hand over the inheritance. But this money was what my father had left for me. I realized that being told to go back to my parents' house was actually an opportunity. With the signed divorce form in my hand, I now had the power to make decisions about my future. I promised myself that I would never give up my father's inheritance, and I made up my mind about what to do next. That day, after work, I went back to my parents' house. "I'm home." "Welcome back, sweetie. I had a feeling you'd be coming home soon," my mother said with a warm smile as she welcomed me, knowing how exhausted I was. The table was set with her home-cooked dishes. I couldn't remember the last time I had eaten a meal someone else made. As I took a bite, I was so moved by how good it tasted that I started to cry. "Did you tell Kyle about the inheritance?" my mother asked. "Yes, and that's when things got complicated," I replied. I told her everything my husband and mother-in-law had said. She was shocked by what she heard. "The inheritance is yours, and it's up to you to decide how to live your life from now on," she said, gently putting her arm around my shoulder as I cried. After staying at my mother's house for a week, I decided to go back to my in-laws' home. "Well, I'm going now. Take care," my mother said as I left. I wasn't afraid to return to that house anymore. With a clear mind, I headed back. When I got there, my husband and mother-in-law were waiting for me with their arms crossed. "Finally back, huh? Have you reflected on your actions?" they asked. "Yes, I'm sorry. Please let me live in this house again," I said, offering a shallow apology. Hearing this, my mother-in-law smirked. "Then hurry up and hand over the inheritance." Actually, the inheritance process is taking longer than expected. It's still not with me. It's a complicated process, so it'll probably take another half a year or more. "It takes that long?" "Well, that's fine," they said, thinking I would obediently hand over the money when it arrived. But they continued to nag me about staying at my mother's house for a week. "The house is a mess because you didn't do your duties as a wife. Clean it up quickly." The house was indeed a mess after just a week, and it was filthy. It was almost impressive how dirty it had become in such a short time. "Yes," I replied. The old me would have been devastated to see the house in this state, but now, things were different. I didn't mind being bullied by my mother-in-law or doing the tough housework. I just did what she told me to do. 12 months later, it was her birthday. "We're going on a trip now. Make sure to keep the house clean," she said. She always went on a trip for her birthday, and they never took me along. "By the way, have you received the inheritance yet?" she asked. "It's supposed to arrive today," I replied. "Well, isn't that perfect? That $570,000 will be a present for my mom. Make sure to transfer it to her account before we return." There was no way the inheritance would conveniently arrive on her birthday, and my husband could see through my lie. I didn't respond but simply smiled and said, "Take care and have a safe trip," as I saw them off. Once they were gone, I put my plan into action. I had been waiting for this day for a long time. They would surely be surprised when they returned, but I didn't care anymore. I quickly packed my things and left my in-laws' house. "Wow, this is amazing," I thought as I moved my belongings into my new home. I had used my father's inheritance to build a house. I was so happy to live in such a beautiful place. I had invited my mother to live with me, and I felt truly content knowing I didn't have to deal with my in-laws anymore. I sank into the soft sofa and felt at peace. That day, my mother and I celebrated our new home by inviting a chef and enjoying a luxurious day together. The next evening, I got a phone call from my husband. "Hey, what's going on?" he asked, confused because all my things were gone when they got back home. "I won't be coming back, so goodbye," I said, trying to hang up since I didn't want to talk to him anymore. But I could hear my mother-in-law shouting in the background. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Where are you? I can't answer that. You told me to clean the house, so I put my things away, I replied. That's not funny. Besides, you haven't transferred the inheritance yet. How many times do I have to tell you that a daughter-in-law's money is mine? Ha! I submitted the divorce papers. I'm single now, you know. When I said that, my screaming mother-in-law suddenly fell silent. I submitted the divorce papers Kyle gave me. We're strangers now. Goodbye. Imagining the look on my mother-in-law's face, I said that and hung up the phone. The thought of her being completely stunned made me laugh uncontrollably. My heart felt so light now that I had nothing to do with that family anymore. After that, my ex-husband called me many times. Whenever I had time, I would purposely answer the phone and let his and his mother's abusive words flow. I recorded every call from start to finish. I decided to take those recordings to the police. They told me that harassment from an ex-husband isn't uncommon and that they would issue a warning before things got dangerous. Luckily, the police acted quickly and went to my former in-laws' house to issue the warning. For my image-conscious ex-in-laws, having the police show up was a big blow. Plus, one of my ex-husband's subordinates, who lived nearby, saw the police visit. Since my ex was well known at the company, rumors spread quickly. Some of his subordinates and colleagues who didn't like him started exaggerating the story, making the rumors even worse. Eventually, the rumor reached the department where I used to work. So I heard the police came by, someone said. I'm divorced now, so I don't know much about it, I replied casually. What? You're divorced? Yeah, the bullying from my mother-in-law and my husband's abusive words were too much, I said in a slightly louder voice so that those nearby could hear. The gossip-loving employees quickly spread the word, and it didn't take long for my ex-husband's boss to hear about it. You've got quite a lot of bad rumors going around, the boss said. What are you talking about? My ex-husband replied nervously. I can't stand men who don't treat their wives well. And with these bad rumors, our reputation suffers too. So, I've decided to have you transferred. The transfer order given to my ex-husband was harsh. He was sent to a branch office in a region with the worst performance, an area nicknamed a landlocked island, because there was no entertainment or anything around. You understand what being sent here means, right? The boss said. Everything my ex-husband had built up crumbled, and there would be no chance of promotion in the future. He accepted the transfer and moved to the countryside, unable to refuse. As for my ex-mother-in-law, she was devastated by her son's tarnished reputation and the fact that they could no longer live together. She became a complete shut-in and eventually developed depression. She also developed dementia and often caused problems at home. My ex-father-in-law tried his best to take care of his wife, who was getting worse. Even though she wasn't his blood relative, she was still part of his family. It seemed only fair that my ex-in-laws faced the consequences of how they treated me. Now, my mother and I are living happily together. We even started gardening in our big yard. If I were still in that house, I would never have discovered such a wonderful hobby. Having a hobby has given me new energy, and my body, once worn out from stress, is now healthy. I'm very happy to have cut ties with my ex-in-law's family.